Here at the Pink Grape, I interview winemakers from all over the world. Our purpose is to have fun, be entertained, discover new wines, and meet great people. I hope you will join our journey around the wine world by subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and please enjoy the interview. Robert, welcome to the show, The Pink Grape. It's a pleasure having you on.
It's great to be here.
Great. So you are a winemaker in the state of Arizona, correct?
Yep, that is true.
I can't wait to learn more about Arizona wines from you, because obviously that's a state that we don't typically hear about as a wine producing state. But before we get into that, I'd like to learn more about yourself. How did you become a winemaker?
In a lot of ways, the 2008 financial crash had a lot to do with it. Prior to running my family's winery, I was a stockbroker, which it wasn't the greatest time to be doing that, and wasn't really enjoying corporate life. And every day on the background of my computer, there was a picture of a vineyard. It was kind of like the meditative, okay, go to the happy place. All right, deal with the next client. And I kind of came to the idea with my family that this was something I was interested in starting. I cashed in my 401k, which is something I would have never recommended a client do. And just went for it. Friday, in the 2008 harvest, I was, right before it, I was working at Schwab. The next Monday, I was shoveling muck in a winery, making $10 an hour. So it was kind of a radical flip there for me. Went down to Wilcox to look at lands, because there's three main wine regions in Arizona. There's the Verde Valley, which has a huge amount of tourism because of Sedona, which is where I was interning and working at other wineries and basically soaking up as much information as I could. And land there is usually near the creeks and everything. So you're looking at maybe $100,000 an acre for farmable land. So that's a little expensive. You got Sonoyta, which is the state's oldest winemaking region. Gordon Dutt, soils professor at U of A, found this area and said, this is the perfect place to grow grapes. And still kind of expensive there, about 10 grand an acre. So went down to Wilcox, which is actually where most of the grapes in the state are grown, 75 to 80%, and found raw land at far less than that. And was like, okay, this is perfect. Now we've got about a 320 acres, 60 of those acres are planted, with another 60 to 80 in the process of developments. And that was all kind of it's a major jump to going out and doing that. But my family had been in farming for generations back in the Midwest and in Europe before that. So the only reason I didn't grow up around the farm was because my father was in the Marine Corps. So we kind of wanted to get back into that, and something my grandfather would have been interested in. Unfortunately, passed away before we could realize it. And grapes are a lot more fun to talk about than corn. So you get you get invited to more dinner parties if you're the winemaker. But it was a radical learning curve. Took classes at UC Davis, worked with a lot of consultants, made myself available to other wineries to basically do any grunt work I could get. And then eventually my brother moved out from California, from Santa Barbara, to help get the winery on its feet. He's now working at a brewery in San Diego, so we never got too far away from fermentation sciences. But it was an interesting building process, and then a lot of growth really fast. When they liberalized the laws in the state, it allowed us to sell direct to consumers, which we couldn't do before. And I think we were the 17th winery in the state at the time, and now there's 120. And we're facing different issues right now. Like there's a grape shortage in the state. So all the grape prices have gone up to basically Sonoma prices. So all over the place. And, but for me, for the personal transition was just trading different kinds of stress. So I went from, having to deal with my clients to dealing with managing. We have 25 employees at the winery now. And for the longest time, all of them were older than me. So I started the winery when I was 26. I'm 40 now. So it's starting to get where about half of them are younger than me, but it was also like, these people are listening to me and they're paying their mortgages off what I pay them. So it caused me to have to grow up real fast. Generation of people who don't grow up fast.
Well, that's an incredible story. So you actually started this winery when you were 26 years old.
Yep. went to my whole family. Every member of my family invested, and said, hey, don't lose it. So when we never, it wasn't so much that I was worried that I was bankrupting the family or anything, but it was enough. It was serious. So, and it was such a young industry. I mean, there were so many young new winemakers coming out here because the cost of entry is so much lower. I mean, I grew up in California, and had I done what I did here the way we did it, we would have gone out of business. The state's far more allowing for mistakes. Like, I had a vintage where we had to dump two different varietals of almost the whole variety, everything, because of volatile acidity, and just too much VA wasn't according to our brand. And if I were paying what I would have to pay for grapes in California for a facility, for everything, would have bankrupted us. But here, it's still fairly business-friendly environments, and the grapes at the time weren't that expensive, and everyone's very interested in drinking local out here. The eat local scene is huge, so we kind of sneak in there with that, and drink local.
Well, that's a amazing story, and congratulations to you for doing that and pulling it off. Now, looking back, you said you started when you were 26, and we're about 40 years old now. So, looking back on it, what's some of your favorite memories from building up this winery into where you are today?
Honestly, a lot of it's out in the vineyard. It's Carlson Creek Vineyard, not winery, not cellars, not wine co, because we're principally a farming operation. We are 95% estate. We buy a few tons here or there from neighbors for blending. Other than that, everything comes off our own vineyard. So I mean, we were planting 20 acres by hand one year. So we had a lot of volunteers come out. My brother-in-law moved out with us for a summer. He's a software engineer, so we can do that sort of thing. We decided we were going to finish this 3-acre portion, and there was only 5 or 6 of us, and we end up knocking it out, and then we saw some lights and went there, and it was a bunch of other wine industry people having a barbecue, and we ended up having this whole kind of just almost like a 50s beach scene kind of party, where it was just a whole bunch of the local winemakers who get together to enjoy each other's company. And I think I really liked that early on, was the camaraderie of the industry. We have a wine festival we do every year, and we used to, before it got too big, have after party at one of the winemakers' houses. So wheelbarrows full of beer and barbecuing, and everyone would bring a bottle, and we would for a lot of times blind taste them. So everyone just kind of trying stuff. We're trying to put that back together. We do a rotating group of winemakers do blind tastings. But I think the big thing was coming from corporate America to a community. And I think that's been the biggest thing about being in the wine industry that I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree with you. I mean, wine brings people together. I've worked a few harvests myself, and I've talked about this in previous interviews, but where I go over to Germany and work a harvest, then there'll be 15 other younger people like me that came to partake in the harvest, and out of the 15 people, 10 of us are all from different countries, but we're all living above the garage together in shared bedrooms. I mean, it's just part of the fun of the industry, which you don't really seem to find in other industries like this.
And people are always surprised. They're like, "Aren't they your competitors?" I'm like, "Yeah, but we also share a brand, and we're all the Arizona wine brands." I think a lot of us have always subscribed to the never speak ill of another winery. Somebody says, "Well, what do you think of them?" "Well, they're really nice people."
Yeah, there you go.
Because it doesn't do you any good, even if you have issues with another winemaker, because you're also reflecting poorly on yourself and your brand. That you would ever talk down about somebody.
Perfect. Well, I also saw on your website, so your vineyard is unique because it's over 4,000 feet above sea level, right? And then your family, like you briefly mentioned before, you guys were farming in Poland, I think I saw, before the World Wars, and then Illinois, the Midwest, and here you are now in Arizona farming grapes.
Yep, Minnesota and Kearney, Nebraska.
Okay, I'm from Minnesota, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. I love Kearney, Nebraska because it's basically like it's surrounded by corn, and I've got 5 generations, their family in the ground, and they're in a plot surrounded by corn on 3 sides in a road and corn across the way. So, but I got a lot of cousins out there still farming. Farming in Wilcox is interesting because people don't know it exists. It's a high valley that's surrounded by mountains, so there's nowhere for water to go except for down into the aquifer. It's about 1 million acres, which is the size of the valley that Phoenix is in. So it's quite large, but it's all ag. If it's not in farming, it's in cattle. So it used to be cattle capital. I mean, across the street from our tasting, or our old tasting room, we just moved it to the winery in downtown Wilcox. One of the Earps was shot across the street. But for the wine side, it's the elevation means it's much cooler, especially in Arizona. Everyone thinks, oh man, is it too hot? Well, we don't even have cactus in the area. That's how high elevation we are. We have really well draining soil. It's a sandy loam that goes down at about 7 to 8 feet. You get a layer of clay. The land we're on hasn't been farmed in 50 years before we got there, so there's no plow plate. So we didn't, I mean, even though we ripped it down pretty deep. And there's really not that much disease pressure. I mean, our biggest risk there is frost. We get snow in the winters. It's up there. We got a decent frost right before May 1st this year that hit our Chardonnay pretty hard, but it's we long pruned to try to prevent that. We also have fans, but we found that whenever anybody asks if what's it similar to, and I can't really compare it to many places in the United States, maybe some places in New Mexico, but usually compare it to, say, South America, Chile, Argentina, Mendoza. We're about similar distance from the equator and similar elevation. We don't have the Andes. I mean, our mountains only go up to 9,000 or something like that. But it's one of the reasons why we planted Malbec, because we're like, well, it's so similar in our neighbor's farm in Argentina and up here. So we started doing that, and it's one of my favorite varietals and my pick for if there were ever to be the, prime varietal of Arizona. But there's a lot of argument on that because so much experimentation, so many varietals being planted that I can't pronounce. So it's like, and like people, some of the guys that have been around for a while, like Ken Galligan, he grafts actively in his vineyard. So he'd be like, well, I want to try this now, so I'm going to graft it. And I don't have the patience for that. So we've got 13 different varietals out in our vineyard, and most of them are international varieties. Malbecs, Cabs, Chardonnays, Syrah, Grenache, that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, and your website, I think you have a wine club, I believe, right?
We do. It's, pretty, for most of it, it's much like any other wine club where you get 6 bottles or 4 or 6 bottles every 3 months, except during the summer. We don't ship right now because that's a death sentence to wine in Arizona. So I think the big thing for it is that we do a lot of experimentation in the winery. We have a few co-ferments we work with, a few kind of fun stuff like Piquette and that sort of thing. And we only really release those to the wine club. Our larger production stuff will go out to distribution or our 3 tasting rooms, but the really fun stuff gets to go to them. And then we have private events at the vineyard. It's a nice experience too, because it's not very heavily managed. So it's, when you come out to an event, you're going into the cellar with us and we're just pulling samples, and you're with the winemaking crew. The guy who runs our wine club is also, works in the cellar. So it's like, it's not a, how do I want to say that, a sanitized experience. The nitty gritty of it, especially when we do vineyard days. I try to get them all out at 4 a.m. one year to harvest for their own personal wine club wine. Nobody wants to be out there at 4 a.m.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that's great. And what we'll do is we'll put a description to your website down in the link below so people can check you out, come visit you if you want, or sign up for the wine club. Because after hearing your story and after just hearing about Arizona wines, your wines in particular, I'm sure that I know myself, I'm gonna try and hunt down a bottle and have it shipped here to my place.
We ship to 46 out of the 50 states, and we'll start shipping again in late September. Next wine club release is in mid-August. I mean, October.
October? Okay.
Releasing in mid-August would be a bad idea. Not so much the winery or the vineyard, it's that the major shipping companies don't have refrigerated trucks. So at some point, it's not going to do well.
Yeah, even one day in the heat in the back of a box truck's gonna.
I'd recommend anybody who's interested to come out and visit the winery. We just opened the new tasting room. You're 100 feet from the vines, and you're just some glass windows away from the tanks and barrels. But we also have locations in Scottsdale, downtown. It's where, honestly, most of our wine club lives within a 100-mile radius there, or even less than, I guess, 50 miles. But there's a wine trail at every place where we have a tasting room up in Cottonwood by Sedona. So you can hit a whole bunch of tasting rooms.
Well, Robert, I always like to end the interviews with this one question, and we do kind of cover it throughout the interview. But in summary, what is your favorite thing about wine?
I like that can be new and old at the same time. I love history and the history of wine. If you ever get a chance, read the book, History of the World in 6 Glasses. How you can have something so massively ancient yet so pertinent. Like we just got back from tasting in another wine region and that's got a really long history, and just kind of go, wow, the grapes that are growing on this spot were here when the Romans were here. And it's just so delicious.
Yeah. Plus it makes you feel good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a great point with the history. I love the history of the wine world. And yeah, it is really cool being able to drink a wine where the Romans had planted their vineyards. Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Or, stand in a church where Clovis, the first Christian king of France, converted to Christianity and celebrated with a glass of champagne. I mean, this is before sparkling, but it's just kind of appeals to the nerd in me.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Robert, thank you so much for being on the show, The Pink Grape, today. Loved hearing about your story, and we will definitely be sending people your way to join the wine club and check out the winery.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this week's interview with a winemaker. Be sure to tune in next week as I'll be interviewing another winemaker. I hope you will join our journey around the wine world by subscribing to this channel. Be sure to like this video and share it with a friend. We'll see you next week. Thank you.